Hi guys, my name is Bobby and welcome back, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 5-ish favorite books of all time as of right now. For most of us, our top 5 books of all time change as we read new books because we find stuff that we love just as much and it gets kind of shuffled in and out. I know my favorite books have changed a lot over the past couple of years. Most of these, none of them are really all that old. A lot of these have knocked off other books, and I just thought it'd be fun to talk about. I mean, there's only 2 fantasy on here though. But I thought it'd just be kind of a fun video to do. I've seen other people do ones kind of like this where they talk about their top 5 or their least favorite. Usually their top favorite because they have more to talk about and they want you to go read it. But yeah, I just thought I would do it, something fun to do, in between. And I really didn't want to film a review for the Richard Laymon book of this month. So this is what I'm doing instead. So let's get into it. So the first book I'm going to talk about is kind of an honorable mention. It didn't quite make the top 5, and my top 5 are really in no particular order. They all can be shuffled around in the 5. But my honorable mention is Rose Madder by Stephen King. Like, I've talked about this before. I read it in October with Vicky, and it was a reread for me. I've read this book 4 or 5 times. It is by far my favorite Stephen King of all time. Granted, I have not read all of Stephen King's works, but this is by far the favorite. And I consider it a favorite because the scariness, I mean, there is a little bit of supernatural in this, but the main fear and what makes you scared in this book could happen to anybody in real life. So that to me is more scary than like a monster in the bushes, because it's like, that's not real. Whereas this is very real. Spousal abuse happens every day, all the time. And at the level that this is, it's extremely scary. So this by far is, it's up there. It's my favorite Stephen King. So I kind of had to mention it. Next on the list, again, these are in no particular order, they can be swapped around, is Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. This was my first Liane Moriarty book. This was amazing. Like, I love the way it's told. I love the way Liane writes. The way she writes her books, I mean, I guess you could kind of consider them contemporary, but a lot of times they're domestic. Like, kind of like domestic thrillers, kind of, but they're not really thrillers either. I mean, this one kind of is. I mean, at the beginning, somebody's dead, you don't know who killed them, and then you go backwards in time and work through the story. I mean, there was some thriller element in it. Again, this features, like, trigger warnings for spousal abuse, yet again, but it was just so, the way it was written was so good. It was so incredibly engaging. I couldn't stop reading it. I read it in, I think, 2 sittings. I just couldn't believe how well this was written. And the miniseries did a really good job as well. I mean, they left some stuff out, but I think they did a good job adapting the book. But I just love the way she writes. And out of all the ones that she's read, this is my favorite by far. This was my introduction to her. I loved the ending. Did I figure out the ending? Yeah, kind of, like, as we were getting there, but the way we got there was so intricate. And it's just like the rest of her books. You kind of figure out, like, what's going to happen at the end, but getting there is what's so much fun. If you have not read Big Little Lies, you need to go read it. And even if you've already watched the show, read the book. There's stuff they left out. It is fabulous. It is one of my favorite books. Next on the list, I've talked about like 50 million times, like especially in the past year, because I read it before I started BookTube, and nobody was really talking about it because it's an indie published book, and all I want to do is talk about it on every social media platform. I've talked to the author multiple times. Last week we had an hour-long conversation about dumb tropes and twists in young adult fantasy. It was so surreal. Like, I had a conversation with her for an hour and a half through Instagram DMs. Like, it was insane. And she's one of the sweetest people ever. She's really funny. And that's The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. Jenna is awesome. She's one of those authors that has no problem talking to her fans. Like, and I just commented on one of her stories. Oh, it was about the book she was reading. She said that the way the ending was, she didn't like it or whatever. So I commented, like, oh, I really hate it when that happens. And then she started telling me about it, and we had a conversation about that, how a book can be really good and then the author ruins it at the end, and oh my, it was awesome. But I've talked about The Savior's Champion a lot. This is an adult fantasy. It is not YA. This is, people just assume it's YA because the protagonists are like 18 years old. It is not YA. It is very much adult. There's a lot of graphic violence. There's swearing. There's a little bit of sex, but it's not a lot. It's mostly graphic violence and, a lot of graphic violence, but fun graphic violence and strong language, a lot of swearing, stuff like that, because Jenna herself is like me and we both have sailor mouths. So, I mean, know that going in. But this is the story of Tobias, who lives in a world where the only magic is held by the savior, and if there is no savior, the world goes into ruin and into war. And every 20 years, I think, no, maybe 18, 19 years, I think when the savior is 18, 19 years old, the sovereign, which is her father, holds a tournament to determine who her husband will be. So there's, I can't remember, I need to reread this. I read this like last year, like in the spring. Well, I can't remember how many. It's like 18. Like, I don't think it's 20. I know it's a high amount of men that are allowed to enter the tournament. They are all separated by kind of what their professions are, like what their interests are. And because this becomes a big deal for the land, like people come to watch them compete, all this kind of stuff. They pick favorites. And they go, and Tobias decides to sign up because he needs the money. Like any man who signs up and is accepted into the Sovereign's tournament, their family gets a handsome sum because more than likely they're going to die. Like it is a fight to the death. There's only one left standing at the end. So you're pretty much signing a death warrant unless you're good enough to win. So their families get a handsome sum because now they don't have a male to work and make money and all that stuff. His sister was in a terrible car accident, or vehicle accident of some kind. She is in a lot of pain. She's pretty much crippled, and the stuff that she's been using doesn't work. She needs the stronger stuff. So he figures if he enters, then at least they'll get the money to be able to buy what she needs. That kind of stuff. So they enter. Tobias, of course, is accepted into the tournament. They enter what is called the Labyrinth, which is underground, and they have all these trials. And they're not all physical. It reminded me a lot of Indiana Jones, mixed with a little bit of Gladiator. So when they're down in the labyrinth, they do have physical tasks, but they also have mental ones where like they're all sitting there and they're getting a lesson on something, and something else happens, and it's to be able to use your brain and think quick on top of actual physical tasks. This book is absolutely amazing. I could not stop reading it. I could not put it down. It is fast moving. It takes off and it doesn't stop. There is a love story in here, but it's not your typical love story. It's not a love triangle. It's not insta-love. Like, the two characters do not even say I love you until, like, page, like, 300 or 400, and this is a huge book. Yeah, it's the 500-page book, and it was, like, page 400 or so by the time they said I love you. It's not insta-love at all. It's very slow progression, getting to know each other. Like, what a concept. So I love the way she wrote the romance. And it doesn't take center stage in the story. The center stage of the story is Tobias trying to get through the labyrinth and be the last one alive. But it is just so, so good. Everybody needs to go read The Savior's Champion. If you like fantasy at all, go read The Savior's Champion. It is absolutely amazing. I love it. Jenna has her own channel on YouTube. Like, she published this entirely herself. The audiobook she just announced the audiobook was just okayed, and it should be out within the next week. So soon you'll be able to listen to it on audiobook if that's the route you want to go. But support an indie author. It is an amazing book. There's going to be 6 in the series. She's in the middle or almost towards the end of writing the next book in this series. And the next book is almost a companion novel to this one. It's called The Savior's Sister. And it is this story from another character's point of view. That is not... I don't want to say anything because it'll spoil it. But there's a character in this book, a female character, who is prominent, and it's her from her point of view, because she's not in the labyrinth and stuff, and like where Tobias is all the time, so, it's from her point of view. So I'm excited, bummed but excited. I'm excited to read it from her point of view, but I'm also bummed we're not, because this kind of ends on like a note where you're just like, I want to know what happens next. And so I'll have to wait until she writes the 3rd book to figure out what happens next. But please go read The Savior's Champion if you haven't. Support an indie author. It is absolutely amazing. The next book on my list, I don't actually have my physical copy of. I do own a physical copy, but I loaned it to my friend to read because she's never read it. And of course, she reads like maybe 2 books a year, so I probably won't get it back forever. I might just get it back from her because I kind of want to reread it. And that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was my favorite book of 2017. It is one of the best books I've ever read. Everybody should know what The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about. It blew up on BookTube. And what was funny is that when it blew up, before I started my channel, I'd already read it. I'd read it like 6 months prior. It was like my book of the month selection in 2017. It was my book of the month selection for, I think, like March or April, like right when it was first released. And nobody on BookTube noticed it until 2018. Like the beginning of 2018, all of a sudden everybody started reading it. I'm like, where the fuck have you guys been? I read that book months ago and loved it. Like, you guys are slow. And I remember when I read it and I'd go watch BookTube and nobody was talking about it. And a lot of these people get Book of the Month. Like a lot of the other BookTubers, a lot of us get Book of the Month. was like, how are they not reading this? How did they not select this book? It is absolutely amazing. And then it finally blew up. It took till 2018 to blow up, but it finally did. So, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, if you do not know what it is about a woman named Monique who is a person of color. She is a journalist at this small magazine, but she's not that famous. You know, she's not like a big name journalist. She just kind of does fluff pieces. And she's asked by Evelyn Hugo, who is this famous old Hollywood actress, think Elizabeth Taylor, who's been married 7 times, and she's going to give their magazine an article to do about her, but she wants Monique. She wants her to be the one to write the article. So Monique goes to her house and she goes, I'm not writing an article for your magazine. And she goes, well, or I'm not giving you an interview for your magazine. And she goes, well, then what's the point of me being here? Why would you go through all this? She goes, I want you to write my autobiography. And Monique is just like, whoa, because that is like a huge thing. Evelyn Hugo's known for being really quiet, really private. She doesn't talk about her life. And she's like, I will give you a tell-all, know-all. Like, I will be completely honest and tell you everything, but you have to write it. And she's like, okay. And so that's when the story begins. You jump back and forth in time, like you do, you know, go back to where Monique and Evelyn are now as they're discussing things. But then every chunk of the book is separated by a husband she was married to. So you go back in time, she'll talk about all the things that happened with this husband, then you'll get a break, and it's like her and Monique's asking her other questions, and you kind of get present time. It is fabulous. There's so much good rep in here. Evelyn herself is a Cuban. She's half Cuban, and I think half Caucasian. I might be wrong. I know for sure she's half Cuban. Monique is African American. So you have like tons of people of color. There's great bi rep in here. There's great like LGBTQIA plus rep in here, period. There's bi, gay, I mean, there's a lot of rep, and it's not like thrown in there like, oh, I'm just doing this to do this. Like, it all fits. The story is beautiful. It's amazingly written. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I just read her new book, and that is another amazing book. She's just amazing. Love her. And now she's an auto-buy author for me now. If you have not read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, please go read it. It's written like, kind of like a contemporary, but also literary fiction. It's not... which, you know, I wasn't sure I would love, but I just could not stop reading it. It is amazing, but it reads really, really well. I got through it in a day. I read it in a day. But yeah, that is absolutely going to be one of my favorites. I don't think it'll ever leave my top 5. It is one of the best books I've ever read. Please go read it. Next book on my list is going to be no shock to anybody at all. If you're shocked, then where have you been? Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I talk about this series ad nauseum. Next book comes out in September. I already have it pre-ordered. This is the story of Mia Corvier, who is in this fantasy world, who is training to become an assassin, to be a blade, which is really elite in this secret school. Her parents were both killed. Like, it's just, I've talked about this ad nauseum. And this, again, is not YA. A lot of people think it's YA. It is 100% not YA. This is an adult fantasy series. People assume it's YA because Mia at the start of the series is 16. It's not YA. Jay Kristoff has said multiple times, this is not YA, this is not YA. Nevernight is adult. It's adult, it's adult, it's adult. Lots of swearing, lots of sex, lots of graphic violence. It is not made for teens. It is an adult book. And it's fabulous. It's absolutely fucking amazing. I am so bummed because I can't wait for Dark Dawn. We were supposed to get it in January, but he pushed it back because he wanted to make sure it was absolutely perfect, so we don't get it till September. But yeah, it's amazing. It took me a while. I mean, 3rd time's a charm. It took me 3 times trying to read this before I actually read it, and I'm obsessed. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. Jay Kristoff is another author who's amazing with his fans. I've had conversations with him too on Instagram. Like, he talks to people on Twitter. Like, he's a really open, amazing author. I absolutely love him and respect him. He's great. I don't know how he does it. He puts out like 4 books a year, which I already have some of those pre-ordered. Like, I have Aurora Rising pre-ordered, which is his next book with Amy Kaufman, who they did the Illuminae files together. Yeah, can't say enough about Nevernight. If you love fantasy at all and you've not read Nevernight, go read it. Emily Fox at Books with Emily Fox, and she had never read Nevernight, and she didn't because it was so hyped, and she was like, hey, I don't want to read it. She just did a reading vlog reading Nevernight. I think it was a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, and she was like, you know, I'm going to hate this. I know I'm going to hate this. People are telling me either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. I need to get through the first 100 pages, which is true. You do need to get through the first 100 pages before it really takes off, because the first 100 pages is a lot of world building. And so she did a reading vlog, and she absolutely freaking loved it. And she was surprised because she said, you know, everybody had hyped it so bad I thought it was going to be shit. And it wasn't. It's amazing. Go read Nevernight if you love fantasy at all. Like, Jay Kristoff's writing is amazing. Like, and he is not afraid to kill his babies. He is not afraid. And I do respect that about him. It reminds me a lot of George R. R. Martin, who is not afraid to kill off his babies. And that's one thing I hate about fantasy, especially young adult fantasy, when you have a really good story, but you never feel any tension or worry for the characters because you know, Sarah J. Maas, that she's never going to kill her babies. She's never going to kill her main characters. So the books get boring because it's like, well, why am I even freaked out? She's not going to kill anybody, nobody important anyways. It's going to be some fluff side character that nobody really cared about to begin with. She's not going to kill any of her main characters. Jay Kristoff is not like that. In his adult books, anyways. In his solo adult books, he is not afraid to kill off his darlings. And read Nevernight. The last book that is in my top 5 was my favorite book of 2016. It is a very polarizing book. It's talked about on BookTube a little bit. Like, I saw it talked about a little bit here and there when I first started getting into BookTube. And I understand why people don't talk about it because the book is so polarizing and the topic that it covers is so touchy and sensitive that I understand why people would be afraid to talk about it because, like, what my opinion on it and how I felt tends to be an unpopular opinion where people get really angry and you get hate comments for it. But that book is All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. This book is one of the most powerful, sad, interesting book I've ever read. Like, this is one of those books that you have an opinion on something and you feel very strong in your conviction and your opinion, and it's the opinion that 99% of the human population has. But this book makes you question it and makes you root for something that you would never root for. This is a hard, very hard-hitting, I would say contemporary literary fiction. Like, how do I describe this book? This book is about a girl named Wavy. And when it starts out, she's like 8 years old. She lives in a family or a house that is full of neglect and abuse. And, like, her mom is strung out on drugs all the time. Her dad is a meth maker and dealer. And he's got, like, in this house they live in that's, like, this old farmhouse that's all dilapidated. He's got these trailers down below with all of his thugs and his, you know, prostitutes that he pimps out and all that down there. And they make the meth and they manufacture the meth. And meanwhile, up in the main house, there is Wavy and her little brother, and she's 8 years old, and they never buy food. They don't buy them clothes. They don't do any of this shit. Like, she is so neglected. It is so incredibly sad. And throughout the book, you just want her to be safe. You just want her to get somewhere to where she's not going to have to worry about these kind of things. And one day, like, she sneaks out at night to go steal food. She sneaks into people's houses and steals food out of their fridge. Like, it is so sad and heartbreaking, and as you're reading it, you're like, what the hell? Like, is anything good going to come of this book? And that's when the controversial part comes in. So then one day, one of her dad's cronies, thugs, whatever, named Kellen, crashes his motorcycle right in front of her house. She goes down to help him, and now Wavy doesn't really talk. She knows how, but she chooses not to because it's better to remain invisible. And she helps him into the house, whatever, like, dresses his wounds. I mean, he's not injured all that bad. And they kind of develop a relationship. And now, when she's little like that, it is a friendship. It is, he brings her food. He brings her clothes to wear. Like, he registers her in school. Like, he does all these things to take care of her. Like, that a normal person, a normal parent would do that has never been done for her. And he's older. I mean, she's 8 at this time. I think he's like 19 or 20. But it's 100% friendship. It is not bad in any way until she's about 13, I think, if I remember right. It's like, it's been a couple years, like 12 or 13, maybe 14. She's in her very early teens, and he's about 23 or so, maybe 24. And Wavy, like, and then, like, a semi-sexual relationship starts, and that's where this gets controversial, because people, obviously, like, it's pedophilia, that's disgusting, like, she is a child, he's an adult, but then, like, me, I struggled because I know it's wrong. Like, he's in his 20s. She's 13 or 14 years old. Like, that is so 100% not okay. She is still a child, even though she's a teenager. He's an adult. Like, it's not okay. But he is the only man and the only adult in her life that cares about whether she lives or dies, whether she eats, whether she's taking care of it all. So you root for them. Like, you want it to... I mean, and it's interesting because it's not like they start, like, you know, he's preying on her. Like, it's different. It's so different. He's not actively preying on her and grooming her and all that stuff like you see in pedophilia. He's just genuinely taking care of her, and Wavy's the one who initiates the sexual contact because that's all she's seen her mother do. So she feels it's the only way to show her love for somebody, and he actually stops it. So it's not... I'm kind of spoiling this, but I get so passionate about it because some people, like, when it got to that point in the book, they just shut it and they're like, nope, gross, this is pedophilia, this is nasty, no, like, and just shut it down. And that's not what it is. Like, it's not what it is at all. Like, that's not what it's intended to be. It is intended to be deep. It's intended to make you feel. It's intended to make you go, what the fuck? Like, question what is right and what is wrong, because the relationship, even when it's not sexual and they're just hugging and kissing and they're not having any formal sexual contact, like genitals to genitals or anything like that, like, you know, it's still technically wrong because the feelings they have for each other has now gone beyond, you know, friendship and him taking care of her. But you still root for them anyways because he's the only one that cares. He's the only one that cares about her and wants to make sure she's okay. She has family on her mom's side that are totally normal, have the space, but they don't take care of them either. They know it's bad, but they just kind of go, eh. So it's kind of like, you know, when they step in and they're like, and it's kind of like, fuck you. You were never there. I have a lot of feelings about this book. I absolutely loved it. I love what Bryn Greenwood did with it. I love where the story ended. I like how everything was handled. It was so sad and so powerful, and like, it really makes you look and really makes you think. And I love books that do that. Books that make you question everything almost. And I mean, if you can handle it, I would suggest you read it. Like, trigger warnings for massive drug use and abuse, prostitution, drug manufacturing, child abuse, child neglect. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of trigger warning topics in here, but it was so amazing. Like, I don't like telling people, oh, go read this book, because it's not for everyone. It is 100% not for everyone. There's people like Julie from Pages and Pens. She read this book and she did a review on it, and I watched it, and like, this was before I had my channel, and I was commenting, I'm like, thank God. Julie feels the same way I do, where she was rooting for Kellen and Wavy, and she wanted it to work out because this is the only person who cared about her. And the way it was written was done so beautifully, and she agreed with me. There was people hate commenting all over, you're gross, you're a pedophile, you think that pedophilia is okay, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, no, that's not what I was saying. I said, specifically that yes, the relationship was wrong, and they, at that age, but can you see it from the other side, where this is the only person who was taking care of this poor little girl and her brother? And like, you have to read it to understand it. And these people didn't read it. They got to that point and, just stopped reading. It's like, oh, this is gross, I can't do this. But it wasn't in a predatory manner, and it wasn't in a seek to abuse manner. And Kellen himself has a disability. Like, it's so well written, and the way she handles it it's just so good. Like, I can't stress it enough. If you can handle the subject matter, please go read this. It is an amazing story, and then come back and talk to me about it, because I would love to discuss it with other people who have read it. The subject matter is very tough to get through sometimes. Like, there was times I had to set the book down and walk away for a bit, because the amount of abuse and neglect this poor child goes through is astronomical. But please go read this book. It is my favorite for a reason. The way she wrote this book, it was so beautiful. Like, and I still can't stop thinking about it. And I read it 2 years ago, and I still think about it from time to time. It is so powerful and so amazing. So if you can stomach it, please go read it so we can talk about it, because I need more people to discuss this with. I know a lot of other booktubers who have read it but won't talk about it because they're afraid of the hate comments after people have read it, because of the very tough subject matter in this book. But it will always be a favorite. You will never convince me otherwise. The way she handled the stuff in here, it was just so beautifully done. Yeah, you will never convince me otherwise. You know, talk shit all you want. The way it affected me and the way it made me think and, you know, question things. I love books that do that, and she did it fabulously, and it's only 350 pages long. So, like, I actually never, I just got this physical copy. I read it on my Kindle, and I've had it there forever, and I said, I need a physical copy of this book. So I just bought, this just came the other day, because I needed an actual physical copy, because this will forever be one of my favorite books. Okay, guys, that's it. Those are my 5.5-ish top books of all time as of right now. That can very well change as I read more books throughout my lifetime, but right now, these are all my top favorites right now. Books that I can't stop thinking about, books that I go back to all the time and go, oh, it is such a powerful story, or oh my god, like I really miss those characters. These are books that I would 100% reread. Like, and I'm not a big rereader, but I love these so much, I would 100% reread these books. Please let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts are, if you plan on picking them up now that I've talked about them. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.